Hello and welcome back everyone. In this video you will learn how to write the introduction section. But before we proceed, I want you to know a little bit about the manuscript structure. So the most commonly used structure to write a research project is the IMRAD structure, which stands for the Introduction, Methods, Results and Discussion section. So you can use a standardized research writing checklist like the STROBE checklist. The STROBE checklist has been created by different researchers in order to form a standardized manner of writing research articles. So when you read an article, you can find what you're looking for quickly. I'll go over the STROBE checklist in a minute. So before you start writing your manuscript, it's always good to have an outline for each section, meaning you want to have specific ideas, and each idea should be turned into a paragraph. So for example, in the introduction section you want to have 3 to 4 ideas, and each idea you want to turn into a paragraph. The same thing with the method section, result, as well as the discussion. So let's go over the STROBE checklist so you can look them up. So as you know, the STROBE checklist has been created by epidemiologists, methodologists, statistician, researcher, and journal editors to help make it more. It's only for observational studies and make the study project or the manuscript itself make it much easier to write. The STROBE stand for Strengthening the Reporting of Observational Studies in Epidemiology. So we can check them out. Here you can find the checklist, whether as a PDF or a Word. So let's go download the cohort study. I have already downloaded the cross-section study here. So let's go over them quickly. So if you can see here, they have the section of the manuscript as well as recommendation for each section. So for the title and abstract, they have 2 recommendations here. You can mention the study design, whether in the title or in the abstract. You can also provide in the abstract informative and balanced summary of what was done and what was found. The introduction, it has 2 recommendations for the background rationale and the objective. The same thing for the methods, it has different recommendations regarding each factor. The same thing with the results section, as well as the discussion. So we'll go over them once we go over to how to write the manuscript as well. So let's go back. So for writing the introduction section, ideally you want to write 3 to 4 paragraphs. Do not write more than that or less in order to make it concise. You want to start the first paragraph with definitions. So you want to talk about the main concept that you're talking about in your project. So if you're talking about a condition or disorder or complication, you want to explain what's that condition and the risk factor, how common it is. It's like an overview of that condition, for example. Then you want to talk about what is not known. This is usually in the 2nd or 3rd paragraph. So what are the gaps in the literature? Sometimes you're conducting a study, and if you look back into previous studies, they will mention that some studies have concluded that this drug is effective. However, there are other studies that concluded that this drug is not effective in treating this condition, for example. So you want to talk about how different studies, for example, had different conclusion, and that still remains unclear. And in the 3rd or 4th, or in the last paragraph in the introduction section, you want to talk about the aim and significance. So what are you trying to answer, and why should anyone care? When I read a manuscript or an introduction section, when I go into the last paragraph, the first thing that I'm expecting to see is the aim, the goal, or objective of the study. This is the research question and the thing that you are trying to answer. So I can see exactly what were the questions that they were asking. So I can go over their results section with their aim in mind. So here's an example of an introduction section that I've wrote. So this is a project that we're working on to see if there is any association between colorectal cancer and diabetes in our institution. So in the first paragraph, I talk about the definition of colorectal cancer. So this is colorectal cancer, the growth of cancerous cell on the colon or rectum. Then I talk about the incidence and how it's increasing. Then I talk about the epidemiology, how it became the third most common diagnosed cancer worldwide. Then I talk about the local epidemiology in our country, for example. Then I try to compare a little bit between the Western countries and our countries. So in Western countries, it affects elderly, while in our country, it affects the younger population more. Then you talk about the several risk factors. Then you talk about the diagnostic, how to diagnose it. Colonoscopy is considered the golden standard. Then you talk about the treatment. Surgical resection is considered the primary treatment. So you can see here that this entire paragraph can be summarized as colorectal cancer overview. Here's the definition first, then the incidence, then the epidemiology. Then you talk about the risk factors here, then the diagnostic modality, then the treatment. Simple and straightforward. Then in the second paragraph, here we have two concepts that we want to discuss, colorectal cancer and diabetes. So in the second paragraph, I do the same thing for diabetes. I define it, then I talk about the different types here, how many types, and how the incidence of epidemiology is increasing and how it's affects that type 2 affect younger population and type 2 older population. Then I talk about the complication of diabetes as well. Then I talk about the treatment. Then I talk finally about the prognosis. So as you can see here, I have chosen, for example, not to talk about risk factors of diabetes here, for example. So it's really depending on what is relevant to your research project. So complications is relevant to my research project, hence why I included it, and prognosis as well. However, I did not talk about prognosis in colorectal cancer. So if I were to summarize each one of those two paragraphs, here it will be colorectal cancer overview. We can write it down. And here it's diabetes overview as well. You can just remove them. I usually don't have subheadings for the introduction section, but this is what it means to have an outline. Colorectal cancer overview, diabetes overview. Then in the third paragraph, I talk about how the two connects with each other. So it is well known that they both share several risk factors, like obesity, older age, and low physical activity. And although diabetes in general is associated with colorectal cancer, some studies showed that it's more associated with type 2. Then I talk more about how they're connected. And here I mention a very important thing. So however the underlying mechanism remains unclear. So I want to talk about what is unclear in the literature, and we don't know exactly what connects the two. There are some suggested hypotheses like hyperinsulinemia, hyperglycemia, and inflammation, and how they play an active role in the development of GI cancer. So then I talk a little bit more about those hypotheses. Then I start supporting my stance or the hypothesis here by some studies. So there's a meta-analysis that was done that mentioned that patients who had diabetes and colorectal cancer had shorter 5-year survival rates in comparison with people who did not. Then I add another meta-analysis and a retrospective study supporting that those two are associated. Here then I talk about another study that concluded that there was no association between the two. So something contrasting in order to see that there isn't a definitive conclusion yet. And here another study showed that there is an association between the two, but not in men. Then you can see how there are different conclusions between different studies, hence why this is an area for research. Then you talk about the growing burden and the impact of patient mortality in the healthcare system. Then here I add some rationale for our study. So there are many conflicting results in the literature, and there aren't available studies locally, so it's important to add new studies. So this is the third paragraph. In the last paragraph, you can just mention the aim. It doesn't have to be a long one. This study aimed, and this is the aim, the association between clinical pathological characteristics between colorectal cancer and diabetes in our center. Then I talk a little bit about the significance and how it can provide new insights by identifying what connects the two. So this is simply how to write an introduction section. A few tips as well. So do not try too much. Stick to the ideal number of paragraphs. Sometimes when I have written introduction or have had co-authors write an introduction section, they would write more than 3 to 4, and this is not ideal because it makes it difficult to edit that section as well. So just stick to 3 to 4 paragraphs. Do not add too many details and percentages. You don't want to do an exhaustive review. You just want something that is straightforward and very clear. It's like an overview, so any reader can read it and just understand from the get-go what you're trying to say. You can also use the background section as an introduction section for your paper if it's sufficient. So if you look back into the IRB or the research proposal, you have probably written a background section. And you can take that background section and make it into introduction section. So if you write a strong background, you can just use it as an introduction and you wouldn't need to write again. I hope you find this helpful, and best of luck.